Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Twitter Space of MOI. This is our second session, and I'm really excited by the response we received in our first session. I see Ananta has joined us. So, Ananta is going to be our main speaker for the day, but this is an open discussion. If anybody wants to contribute anything, do feel free to reach out. Also, we'll be putting a session on a MOI.Tech YouTube. People who want to listen to a previous session can go to MOI.Technology YouTube channel and listen to it. So we'll get started with today's session. So first of all, I would like to introduce Ananta. So Ananta is a industry expert. He has more than 25 years of experience in both Web2 and Web3 space. And he has currently he's heading Server Lab Inc., which is a digital innovation company developing advanced technologies for the personalized digital world. So by personalized digital world, we mean metaverse, but we imagine a more cohesive environment where the user is at the center of everything. So, hello Ananta, can you hear us?
Hi, Geetika. Good morning or good evening.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
So it's early morning for you, I guess.
Yes, it is. It's not early. It is morning. Saturday morning.
So yeah, a little bit if you can tell about your experience in building Web2 and Web3 solutions and how it's different in both the environments.
Yeah, I think last week's topic probably gave some introduction to what Web 2 and Web 3 is. So, for the sake of brevity and not to repeat what we said last week, so people can go and listen to it if they need be, and I think it may be useful. Web 2 is typically system centric, and Web 3 is user centric. Right? Web 3, the way it evolves, is becoming participant centric. And at a very high level, that's the difference. And I recommend people who want to understand what the difference is listen to that earlier conversation that we had. Now, why should the organizations and users move from Web 2 to Web 3? Web 2 is doing well, right? That's the first question. So why are we going through this change? That
Right.
uh, that
Is there a need, like, is it just FOMO, or is there a real need for that change?
Yeah, so it's a very good question, and we have to look at what real user benefit or business benefit Web three is going to offer. Right now, any technology change for the sake of technology change is not very productive. Right, the long term it doesn't work. Now, if you understand internet itself, what is the foundational value that gave people is connectivity. Right? So internet allowed people to connect and talk at a very foundational level. It allowed people to connect globally, which was not possible before, and allowed informations to be transferred. Now, that's what the technology that was the social requirement which the technology enabled. Now, the question: what is this new requirement in the society, and what does technology need to do to enable that? Is the question, right? Now, the as I said in the last call, right, technology has now become very central to how we live life. More than technology, digital has become central to how we live life. It's like the industrial revolution. We are having a digital revolution,
True,
and we
true.
are and we are getting to the uh, very interesting phase of this revolution, and which is we are going to be able to do day-to-day things doing digital, right? So it's not just about communication. It's not about just sending an email. It's not just about automation. And we're entering into an era, I think maybe the next 20, 30 years, where the difference between virtual and digital for businesses and users alike will go away, right? The line is kind of blurring between what we see as virtual and what we see as digital. So, how people interact with each other, businesses with their users, and users between themselves, is going to be very different in the new era. And that's the change, right? So society is going to a model where they're use digital as a medium to communicate and operate between themselves. Now, previously it was just communication; it is now operation as well, right? And when you do that, you need to have a lot more control as a participant in that society, if you're going to be able to provide the kind of business benefit at a very high level. So for businesses, they are going to provide newer capabilities, which foundationally is going to get integrated into people's life. So let me take this example today, right? A Twitter or Teams call. Now, this is a capability that runs on Web2 today. It's communication, but then in real life, if you and I were to having this communication, we will choose the kind of mode, place, and preference, right? We may choose to make it as based on the message and based on our confidence. We may choose to communicate as an webcast that is talked to a lot of people, or we may choose to communicate in a coffee shop if it is a little bit more secretive, or we may need to put our black hats and sit in a dark room with nobody around to talk about what we're talking about. Now, that's how real life operates. But today, that's not the case, right? All of this data gets stored wherever it needs to get stored. And so the users, while they want to have, the businesses need to provide the users the capabilities, functional capabilities that the apps need to provide. They also need to be able to allow the users to have the kind of confidence and the lack of anxiety in their interactions in the digital world that they have in their real life today. That's not possible today because your Web2 world is very centralized. There is an intermediary, right? So this conversation today is not customizable based on my need and your need. Now, that is the
Yeah.
reality. And so we need so businesses need to provide users the confidence in their product and services by allowing the user to control that. So this emerging digital world can be operated in a very successful way. That's why businesses need to move. There's no choice, right? So the kind of services they provide are more closer to how users want to live their lives, and so they need to be able to provide them the confidence that the application will provide user experience that they are looking for, and so they're more secure and able to work. So it's moving from communication, using technology to communicate, using technology to operate, and which means you need to move the needle to the user, because that's when they are more confident and they're able to adopt the business applications. So, so let me ask you a very simple question. Assume you're
Right.
doing Twitter call today or Teams call or any. Would you
Mm-hmm.
want to have the experience of deciding where this recording gets stored?
Of course.
Right? Why are
It's
you
a very valid, as a user, this is a very valid concern. We might not want to share our personal or professional recordings in a third party software.
Yes, and that has to be foundationally enabled. It cannot just be a feature of one application, right? So the argument today would be here is an application which can allow that, make it happen. But that should be a choice the user has. And today Web2 technologies are centralized, right? So we can take this to another example, supply chain, right? So typically a completely different example where business to business operates. Now, uh, they need the kind of privilege and security and rights they have on their interaction with their data, which is not available today, right? So Web2 businesses uh, have no choice but to move to this new world of providing the user ownership and control in the environment and how their value gets managed, if they are to provide the confidence to the end users, which will allow them to service them better, right? So that's the need for Web3. We need to go from an intermediated model to a disintermediated model, but then the intermediary now becomes the user, because that's how we operate in real life. So when digital moves from when networks or internet to technology moves from a communication medium to an integrated medium, enabling living, unless you make this happen, applications will not be able to provide the confidence users are looking for.
So basically, you are saying that as the society is interacting more and more digitally, we have to upgrade the digital interactions accordingly.
Yes. So the digital interactions today we don't have an interacting model. It's a very programmatic model, right? So
Right.
you don't have a utility effect, right? So we look at it from an so obviously we have come a long way. So we look at things today in the technology world or the internet world from the standpoint of a utility, not from the standpoint of an uh, uh, standpoint of the of a capability. Yeah, we look at it from the standpoint of a capability, not from the standpoint of a utility. So obviously, it's like opening a water tap and water comes in, switching on the power and power comes in. Digital is not there yet. So that's where it's going to get to. But then you should have the confidence that it'll happen without absolute provided confidence that will happen without the users being insecure. So the interacting world needs a different model. It'll use the
Right.
same connective base, right? It'll obviously use the same networking capability, but we need to layer this idea of personalization on top of that so that the applications and the utility becomes relevant to each individual. So if you want to think of
Interesting.
it at a very high level, internet is there, it provided connectivity. Now we have the operational capability that needs to be laid on.
Right. So, but what are the like challenges when somebody decides, as you have experience of building a lot of business solutions, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, as a decision maker, what are the primary challenges that anybody faces when they think about moving from Web 2 to Web 3?
Yeah. So first, obviously, there is a people are when I talk to uh, customers, entrepreneurs, and business owners, the first thing is they think that it's a huge change management issue, right? So it's like, hey, how do you move this thing from Web 2 to Web 3? It's a very daunting task for most people, right? They just don't know where to get started. So any change needs to be enabled by a cookbook which allows you to make the change happen, right? So, so they look at the. So we all talk about the end product, but then there is no clear roadmap to define what the end product is and how do we get there. So, uh, Rome is not built in a day, right? We have to take the first step. So, at a very high level, it's an all or nothing game today, Gitika, right? So we
Yeah.
just and that's discourages people. So we need to see confidence along the way for people to make happen. So the whole problem today is we don't have a very clear approach on what the end benefit are, but and two, more importantly, we don't have a very clear. The industry doesn't have a very clear change management model to make that happen. So people need to see change, right? And and that's a big problem. So and two, the corollary of that is we don't have tools and technologies which allow people to incrementally make changes so that they can reach the goal. And and that is the foundational problem or the challenge that we have on people adopting Web 2 and migrating to Web 3.
So recently, I was going through an article on LinkedIn which talked about how moving to Web 3 is not a practical solution because to use any Web 3 platform, we expect our end users to have at least a MetaMask wallet or some other wallet.
Mhm.
So, your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So the problem is people don't understand what a wallet is, right? So it's like the days of I don't know how many people on the call recognize this. I have lived in an environment where we didn't have user ID password. Okay. So
Okay.
so so when user ID password came in, it was very daunting. But it was more closer to how we do things. What I mean by that is it is a lot more. A MetaMask wallet is a lot more difficult to understand than a user ID, even if the user ID was new. So the problem of adoption is people don't know what it does to them, right? So what we have done at Moise, what you need to do is if you're
Right.
going to live in this digital world, you need a, a digital me, right? You need to have a digital Geetika, okay, defined. And the digital Geetika needs to be usable everywhere as a digital representation of yourself and appropriately reflect the kind of attributes you use in every interaction and every role. A wallet is a tool which enables that, but then we can't just the tool. We have to sell the benefit. So at MOI, what we do is we have created this idea of digital me using a technology called MOI ID, which allows people to have simple user ID, password like experience, which they are already aware of, and then intelligently, based on the context of the interactions that they are working on, provide the kind of information they need for that role. So the problem is, it's users. One, it is not very easy to use the wallets today. Two, the purpose of the wallet is not very clearly understood by the user. And three, it has to be uh, uh, a single attribute which allows people to operate in the digital world, right? And so, yes, the technology of Metamask Wallet is required, but then not the way it is. So it has to be more humanly relatable and user friendly and easy to use, so that people understand why they need it, as opposed to this wallet is required for this application. So if I were to tell you that this is an identity that you can use everywhere in the digital world, it's a digital key, would you take it up?
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's the difference, right? So you need to, so if you sell the technology as a wallet for an application for a blockchain, yes, that's good. But then what is truly required is a digital representation of yourself, so that you can interact in the digital world across all games, all blockchains, all networks. It's like you're reborn in the digital world. So maybe a day will come when people are born, they, along with their naming, they will also get a digital name, so they can digitally interact in the metaverse. And we enable that using something called MOI ID, which allows people to do.
Right.
So,
What about the storage challenge in Web3? How do you think that should be approached?
um, the storage challenge is primarily centers around the fact that today you don't have any control for applications and users to decide in an in a practical way where they want to store the data, right? So the technology of decentralized storage exists. What we mean by that is, you have technology today where you can take the same file and put it across millions of nodes, or thousands, hundreds of thousands of nodes at least. And technology exists in an efficient way to access that. So that does exist, right? The technology for distributing data storage exists. But then what is not available is a native way for the applications and the users to decide where and how to use the data. And and that needs to be fixed. So I gave this example last time, right? So we can decentralize the example of a photograph that you want to store about your vacation, and then legal document. So a lot of progress has been made on the decentralized technology standpoint, but how that gets integrated along with the existing cloud solutions uh, into an application so the users have native control is not clear, right? So people are not going to move from one to the other. So in a very tactical way, I might have AWS, I might have GCP, and I might have a bunch of decentralized nodes on which I want to put the data. Now, all of them need to coexist, right? It's not one or the other. So the ability for them to coexist and allow the choice to the user and application in a native way does not exist. The technology of decentralized storage does exist, but then integrating that into practical business applications and providing the user's choice based on their interaction context does not exist. And that's where we make the difference in MOI again. We have a native way to uh, store store data, and in different places based on the participant requirements for each interaction. So to take it a little bit low down, we are the first probably blockchain technology which allows read and writes of files as an interaction type natively. So you can post your pictures in the same network while managing your token transfer for an asset. So both can be executed on the same network without you trying to understand what the differences are. Today, that doesn't exist. For example, decentralized storage is an independent solution away from your other value transfer or state management solutions. So So the technology of decentralized storage exists. How that all works together with the current storage providers, current storage solutions, and seamlessly provide control to the application end users is something that needs to be worked.
That's an interesting take. But given all the challenges,
Mhm.
uh, is it worth moving to Web3? Like, is this the right time to migrate?
Yeah, so it absolutely is, right? So if you look at what at least we are saying is the fact that we are going to a digitally connected world and the fact that we are going to do your day-to-day interaction in digital is given. Now, obviously, that demands a certain set of behaviors that the network needs to provide, without which it is going to be very difficult to uh, add value and survive, right? So obviously, the move to Web3 is not optional. It needs to happen. Now, there are a lot of good things in Web3 which allows people to make that move, right? So a lot of value has been released, a lot of progress has already been made. Now, it's like uh, anything else, right? So if you looked at the pre-internet days, if somebody told me about 30 years back, uh, internet would be where it is today, nobody would have agreed, right? So it's about the days when communication was completely not in technology. So obviously it looks daunting, but the challenge is for us to practically enable that, right? So the only way you will change anything is by starting to change. So the only way you learn anything is by doing, right? So yes, there are challenges, but there's a lot of progress, a lot of elements, a lot of capabilities which allow true meaningful business benefit for the enterprises and more importantly for the end users and moving to Web3. So if you're going to be in a digitally interacting world of the metaverse, uh, staying in Web2 is not a choice. And as we have seen in the last 2.5 years, how technology can make a big change in our lives and foundationally change how we behave as a society. So and 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 that's only going to increase. And if it's going to increase, then I think staying in Web2 is not a choice.
That's very interesting way to some things. That staying in Web3 is not no more a choice if you want to build a business which is apt for future needs.
Yes. So so it's always like that, right? You have correct value and a new value to us because we need to move. But then that's why I started off with a larger catalyst, right? The larger catalyst is that the society is moving to a digitally interacting model. That's not a
Right.
choice businesses have, right? So that's just happening. So and because of different situations, and so if we have to be relevant and meaningful and add value to customers in that environment, we need to move to a model of Web3. So 2 and 3 are just numbers, but really we need to move to a model of an uh, medium or an internet where people can transfer value which they can personally control, and businesses need to support that environment.
True. So, if anybody has any questions or wants to add anything to the discussion, you're welcome to request the access. And the session is recorded and it will be shared on MOI.Technology YouTube within 3 to 4 days from today. You can share it with your friends and family. So, Ananta, would you like to add anything else, or should we just sum up the session?
Yeah, so I think the key message takeaway I will have for people is the choice from Web2 to Web3, or the change in the internet is not a choice of technology. It's a choice. It is a necessity of change in the environment. So that's the first. So moving from Web2 to Web3 is not an let me say move from an connected world using technology to an operating world using technology is not a choice. That progression is happening. So businesses and enterprises and users who want to stay relevant will have to make that move. Right? It's no longer a choice on us. So it is not a technology looking for a problem. It is a real change that's happening in the society, which is being addressed by technology. Obviously, there are early leaders in the technology who have been visionary, who have thought through this early on and have provided us some capability to make that move happen. Now, what is going to happen, or what is going to happen the next? 2-3 years, this technology will get more efficient, more business models will come in, more use cases will come in, which makes it more efficient, scalable, and more importantly, if businesses want to provide the customers satisfaction they're looking for, they will have to provide control to the end user, and that's the way the new interactions will operate. And lastly, this technology is not just about scalability or this new society, and if you can see that in the world today, is not about scalability and benefits. It's about the society, the digital society being equitable, right? So the big move that's happening is to move to the society where things can be equitable, so that everybody is happy and they're able to interact in a very meaningful way in the society. So that's the change which is permanent, and businesses will need to adapt it to make that happen. Are there challenges? Yes, but there is a lot of progress made, and there are practical ways we can make that happen. And MOI has got a bunch of tools, and I would like everyone to check that out to see how it can make this practical change to equitably operating emerging digital world can be made.
That's an interesting way to sum up things, Ananta. And you made a couple of very valid points about how it's no longer an option, and also challenges are there. But day by day, the Web3 environment is improving more, in the blockchain industry is working on making it better and better. We have Rahul with us. He would like to add. So, Rahul, please, you can switch on your mic.
Yeah.
Hi, Rahul.
Hi. Thanks, Geetika. So, Ananta, I guess you have gone through the tweets from Jack today morning, Web2 plus Web3 is Web5. Can you please shed some light on it? So, what are your views on that analogy?
So first, we need to understand Web3 is not a numerical move, right? First, before somebody goes to Web4, Web5, Web6, we need to understand what Web3 is, right? So it is not, the foundational understanding need to be that the move from the current internet to new internet is dimensional, not linear, right? Adding a few features are not technological capabilities are not going to make this happen. So we foundationally need to move the network from providing connectivity and transfer of data to a network which will enable a digital society where human-like interactions happen. Now, that difference is not a difference of sophistication. That difference is a difference of dimension. So the dimension that we think which need to come in is the user, right? The individual. So that dimension is not just about controlling my data. When we say participant centricity is required, it is the ability of the individual to be the bearer of the truth in a network. So and that's today a user, whichever technology we use, is an attribute of the network, and that's how foundationally today things are built. For digitally, it is like the the world in real life. The world is an attribute of you, right? Meaning you decide how you operate in the world. But that's not the case in the digital world. The digital technology decides today how you operate in that. What we are saying is that has to change for true value transfer to happen. So Web3 is an attempt to do that. It's just because the number move doesn't mean that. The foundational attempt is to make value transfers in human interactions happen in the digital world where they happen in the real world. So that's my take. So the personalization is the foundational dimension which needs to be introduced. When you say personalization, participant introduced into computing and networks, so that they can manage it the way they want. So very simple example, maybe looks very silly, but then if you want to go from uh, Jayanagar to MG Road, there are many roads. The road that you take should not be determined by the owners of the road, right? The road that you take is today determined by you.
Yeah, true.
And that is very native. Okay.
Yeah.
So by adding a feature, that's not going to happen. So the entire digital has to be centered around an individual. And that's a dimensional shift. And the fact that it went from 2 to 3 or 3 to 5 is incidental. Okay. Or 7 or 10.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So, if I understand things right, so you mean we need to move away from we have a different dimension of thinking where we need to just move away rather than making a systemic changes in the protocol or the network, we should have a dimensional shift towards personalization.
Yes.
Right.
So yeah.
Got it.
So is computation an attribute of the individual, or an individual an attribute of computation?
Yeah.
That's the foundational question. Okay.
Yeah.
If computation is an attribute of an individual, obviously you have to represent that in the machine. That's an engineering.
Yeah.
But foundationally, adding another sophistication layer to an existing setup is not going to make this fundamental change, which is what human beings or human-like interactions want in a digitally operating system.
Got it. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
I guess not. So if there's not anything important that we haven't covered, we can, just think about it. Otherwise, I think today's session was very thought provoking in terms of how Web3 has uh, worked till now and where it's heading. I think it was an interesting session. We'll follow up with more sessions, Ananta. Looking forward to having you with us again.
Yeah. So one suggestion that I have, Geetika, is maybe
Right.
you can open this out and have people ask the questions a priori, right? So submit the questions so that we can make it more interactive. So,
That's a good idea. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Ananta. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you to all the listeners.
Thank you.
thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.